Fóilte, everybody, welcome, as we say in Irish. You can have a go at saying that too. Fóilte. My name is Ida, and I'm a member of the Amherst Irish Association, of which there are a number of core committee members. Tim there is our treasurer, membership person, website, magician. Sam at the door does most of the coordinating. Annie does all the tea and scones, jam and butter, and all of that happens after the presentation. You can have a look and see our earlier programmes. We formed in 2014 after the Blarney blowout to show that this community could do lots of positive things. And all of our presenters present for free to support our mission, which is to present on matters Irish in this town and area. We survive mostly on membership, and we get support from the Irish government for our advertising. So you may have seen the advert for Catherine's talk in the Amherst Bulletin. So we want to acknowledge the Department of Foreign Affairs Immigrant Support Programme and their support of our efforts. We would encourage you at this time of the year to renew your membership if you are members. I'm looking at Angie and Tom. $25 for the year. Welcome, welcome, welcome to all the strays. $25 for the year. It's the main source of our funds to book this lovely venue and to provide the tea and scones. So if you'd like to give a gift at this time, this special time, you might consider the gift of the membership of our association. We also have some, for our first time ever, we're having a go at a calendar, which is mostly Tim's work. His photographs by Jonathan and Amanda, our other key members, are our musicians and our Irish language teachers. We also want to acknowledge Chip Costello there, who's also a teacher of Irish. Chip, just raise your hand. And he teaches below at Elms. All right, so enough of me, other than to say, mille poiches, 1,000 thanks. There's Jonathan, our music guy, Sean. Thank you so much, and we're especially delighted to have Katherine O'Callaghan with us today. There's a lovely connection between the calendar and Katherine, if I can mention that. Catherine's mum and dad have a special connection to Emily Dickinson. She might explain that herself along the way. And Catherine's dad and Jim and Pauline come to visit regularly. And when he's here, he's a fine eye, he's a beautiful photographer. So we asked his permission to include some of his photographs in this year's calendar. So it's truly a transnational effort, which links back to Katherine, who will now present on our music and the Irish novel. A big bula bus for Katherine. Thank you.
For me, Ida, thank you very much, Ida. Well, if I sit, can you see and hear me okay? Right, okay. Okay, so off we go. She is at the piano, her hands travelling languidly over the keys like a woman in a vermeer. She hummed when she played, as if enraptured by some secret music in her head, rather than the embroidered pages in front of her. This opening quote is from Mary Morrissey's novel, The Rising of Bella Casey, which is a fictionalised account of the sister of the playwright Sean O'Casey. And the novel's opening contains a really striking scene in which Bella, she's called Bella Beaver at this point, is on a Dublin city street, and it becomes apparent to us that 1916 is occurring at the same time, and she can hear the shooting coming from the GPO. But she is actually transfixed by something else, which is the appearance of a piano on the street. She blinked twice, not sure if she had conjured up what she saw. A piano. Had it been there all along? Or had God rolled it in on the stage while her attention had been distracted? It stood in the gutter at the other side of the street, canted to one side. Against instruction, Mrs. Beaver straightened. So Bella realises the piano has been left there by looters who have now run on further, and she decides to take advantage of this serendipity, and with her son's help she hauls the piano home to her own home herself. It was a broadwood, an upright broadwood, intact in all this ruin, offering itself to her. Indian rosewood case, inlaid panels and candle sconces, the lid open to show a perfect set of teeth. A music holder with a scrolled inset in the shape of a treble clef. She laid her hand gingerly on it. The wood was silky to her fingertips, and she felt a rush of the sublime. So Mary Morrissey uses pianos throughout the novel to chart social mobility and power, and they're Bella's solace and a projection of her desires. So her fortunes rise and fall. Bella ends up living in the tenements that Sean O'Callaghan then uses in his plays. But this is very much mirrored by whether she possesses a piano or loses it at different stages of her life. The piano, like the trees on O'Connell Street, bears witness to historical and personal traumas in this book. Later in her life, she becomes fearful of playing the piano because so many things have happened in front of it that she begins to fear that as she plays, all of that pain will sound back out from the piano again. This quote. If she had struck the keys, she feared they would only release a piercing scream that would tell of what had been done there. Every time she looked at it, she saw not only that vile scene replayed over, but a repository of her own shame and guilt of what she had done to Nick. Now, Mary Morrissey is, of course, not alone in using music in her literary plots. A few other examples, we have Kevin Barry's Beetlebone, which tracks a sort of fictionalised John Lennon going to Cloubet in Mayo where he wants to buy an island. We have Claire Kilroy's Tender Wire, which is a psychological thriller which concerns a violinist who's searching for a rare violin. We have Colm McCann's Zoli, which moves to Eastern Europe in the middle of the 20th century, and it explores the story of a Roma woman whose songs are transcribed into written poetry, which has all sorts of profound consequences within her community. And I think the use of music is really striking in contemporary historical fiction. So it often stands in for things which cannot be expressed perhaps in words. These are an example of some of the contemporary historical novels of the last few decades. Sebastian Barry's A Long, Long Way is telling the story of those Irish who took part in World War I, which, as we know, in recent years there's a lot more information has come out and a lot more stories, but was often a silenced part of history. And both Joseph O'Connor and Roger Doyle wrote trilogies charting key moments in 19th and 20th century Irish history. So just take a look at a couple of moments from those texts. In Barry's A Long, Long Way, this is his protagonist, Willie, and he writes about his mother and how he used to sing to her as a child. She set him on a chair to sing like any woman might, and he threw his small head back and sang some song of the Wicklow districts as might be, and she saw in her mind 100 things of childhood, rivers, woods, and felt herself in those minutes to be a girl again, living, breathing, complete, and wondered in her private mind at the power of mere words, the mere things you rolled around in your mouth, the power of them strung together on the penny string of a song, how they seemed to call up 100 vanished scenes, gone faces, lost instances of human love. And I think in some ways what Barry is capturing through his character here is the way in which authors often use music, that they're using it to conjure up these 100 vanished scenes from histories, these gone faces, these lost instances of human love. When Joseph O'Connor was writing his book, Star of the Sea, he's written a little bit about how he came up with these characters. If you haven't read Star of the Sea, it's the story, it's a famine novel. But of course, when we think of a famine novel, immediately we're thinking, oh gosh, do I want to read this? But actually, you can get students to read this book really easily by telling them that it opens with the idea that there is a murder going to take place on a ship which is crossing the Atlantic. So it's a coffin ship. And of course, with a coffin ship in 1845, you have all of the different levels. You have the steerage folk down at the bottom struggling on some gruel, and then you have the entire menu for the upper class passengers who are living a completely different existence. And so we track the journey of this ship across the Atlantic. So O'Connor wrote an introduction to this book, and he noted something about how he put together this story. He said, I had the notion that Pius Mulvey, one of his characters, who's a balladeer, that he might once have been a singer or a songmaker. I don't know why, it just seemed right. And other characters were suggested by the Irish ballad tradition too, that complex and deeply beautiful body of art created by geniuses whose names we will never know. I tried to take these archetypes and write about them as though they were real, just as Mulvey, one of several aspiring artists in the novel, borrows the melodies of the past and fills them up with new words. So O'Connor uses some of this insight in the novel itself, and we have the character then of Pius Mulvey, who's a man who sort of digs his way out of famine-time poverty through singing, and he has an innate understanding of the power of the ballad and the power of being the person in the community who can sing and who can tell the story. And this is Mulvey. Often it felt to Mulvey as if the songs were a secret language, a means of saying things that could otherwise not be said in a frightened and occupied country. So I think that this idea of what cannot be spoken is very important, particularly in terms of the famine. Chris Morash has written about what he calls the defining feature of the famine. It is not hunger or disease, or emigration, or displacement, or land ownership. It is not colonialism, or resistance, or culpability. It is absence. There is the absence of food, the absence of the culture that was uprooted, and most of all, the absence of the human beings who died or who emigrated. So I think music in a lot of these novels I'm discussing often stands as a marker of points of silence, of the dispossessed, of the unspoken, of absences, and the music stands as a sort of placeholder for those moments in history where we do not have the voices of the people who lived. So music in novels can act as a sort of shortcut because it can place us very immediately into a time or place. I'm thinking of a few novels that do this. For example, Claire Kilroy's All Names Have Been Changed, which uses names of recognisable songs as chapter titles, so it immediately conjures up a world for you before you even get into the text itself. And even when the musical allusions are not central to the plot, they can have a powerful effect. I'm thinking of Colin McCann's Transatlantic, do I have a picture of that there? Yeah. Its broad sweep of 19th and 20th century history, fictional and historical characters. So in this book, McCann uses characters from Frederick Douglass coming over to Ireland during the famine, all the way up to George Mitchell travelling the other way during the peace process, coming back and forth over the Atlantic to try and get the Good Friday Agreement together 150 years later. And in all the little different sections and different time periods in this book, there is reference to some music of the time, and it really helps to place you in the moment. In more recent times, we've Sarah Baum's book, which if you haven't come across her yet, she has 2 books now, and really beautiful writing. She chooses 7 pieces of music that she has the main character listen to at different points during the novel, sometimes with headphones on, and she's just in this little world of her own. And separately, Bohm wrote a piece about this where she lists the music and she really encourages her readers to go and find the music and listen to it to give you greater insight into the characters' tastes and moods. And going even further, we've a writer like John Connolly, the crime writer, who has even published CDs alongside his novel, right, so that you can then listen to the music and create the sort of mood at a given moment, producing atmosphere. So this is an engagement with music as a sort of external embellishment to the book itself. I teach a course on music and the Irish novel in UMass, and one of the things we do in that class is we try to distinguish between novels that use music in this very external way, right? You can put on the music yourself, put it on your CD player, listen to it while you're reading the book. And then novels that create a more internal musical world, where it's a sort of embedded energy within the text itself, and you can't just go out and buy the CD. You have to actually read the book. And that's the sort of musical novel that really excites me and interests me, is the creation of music within the actual novel itself. Reflecting the oral culture from which it developed, Irish literature has also engaged with music, of course, beyond thematic and storyline concerns. We think of music and literature over the centuries that have come together and apart. Daniel Albright, who's written wonderful work on music and literature, always talks about this sort of oscillation of it coming together and apart. And in ancient Ireland, of course, we think of the bards and we think of poetry and music as being one. And perhaps that still influences, in some ways, contemporary novelists. The sort of desire to produce something poetic and musical within the prose itself. And of course, they're all following Joyce in this, as they have to for everything else. Joyce, who has so many really evocative representations of music. If we think of his famous short story, The Dead, where the folk song, The Lass of Aughrim, is sung, and it floats in this way through the house and evokes for Greta these memories of Michael Fury, her young love, who lies buried in Galway. Or in Ulysses, Joyce does all sorts of extraordinary experiments with how to represent music and sound in language. How can he get the music across to us? Is it through the lyrics? Is it through the rhythm? Can he evoke the melody in some way? And then in his extraordinary final work, Finnegan's Wake, he refers to it, perhaps slightly ironically, as pure music. But we certainly sense that there's something completely different, something really innovative going on in terms of language here. And I think that has influenced some more contemporary writers. I'm thinking here of Emer McBride's A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing, Anna Burns' Milkman About the Troubles, which is very recent, and Mike McCormack's Solar Bones. These are all works in which you feel the novelist is really trying to push at the edges of how we think about the novel, and thinking about it as you almost feel there's sort of these oral stories are jumping out of the pages of the book and don't want to be contained within them. So we're thinking now of novels which are interested in aspiring to something of the condition of music. That's how Walter Pater referred to it. So that's a sort of unity of content and form. I took a quote from Huxley, who's trying to think about this. How would you actually produce a sort of musical novel? And he says, the musicalization of fiction on a large scale in the construction. Meditate on Beethoven, the change of moods, the abrupt transitions, the modulations, not merely from one key to another, but from mood to mood. A theme is stated, then developed, imperceptibly deformed until, though still recognizably the same, it has become quite different. Get this into a novel. How? Which is quite the question. So I think many novels ask us to create intense and complex visualizations in our mind, right? The author is often creating a scene that they're asking us to imagine what is taking place. But for what we can term musical novels, they're particularly the author's concerned with the creation of a sort of sound world. Not one produced just by musical illusions or the fact there's a performance taking place, but through the capacity of the reader's mind. So when I think about this, I think of how, you know, a coded score, a musical score in any case, is a sort of strained attempt to capture what music is into lines and spaces on a page, but then to go further and try to do that through words, which are already weighty and flawed and of ambiguous signification. We're getting close to what Joyce thought he might be doing in Finnegan's Wake, which is to subordinate words to the rhythm of water. So I think it has to be true to say that the musical novel will, and even should, always fall a little short, because it isn't a piece of music. It must fail to some extent. It must reside and revel within a zone of unresolved uncertainty. And I think that perhaps is where its power lies. It's in a sort of unsettled zone between orality and text, transience and transfiction, the writer's aural atlas, as McCann calls it, and the reader's inner hearing. So when we think about experiencing music, we might primarily think about listening to it as it's being performed, or we put the CD on, or the record on. But a musician can also experience music in another way, known as audiation. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term. It was coined by a musicologist in 1975. So it's when you can imagine the world of the musical piece without the music being present. So you pick up the score and you can imagine the entire piece of music in your mind. There's a very famous rendition of this in the movie Amadeus. You can cast your mind back to that movie about Mozart. There's a scene where Salieri, his supposed rival in the movie, is leafing his way through sheets of Mozart's music. This is all original scores that Mozart has written down. And as he is leafing through them, we can hear the music that he can hear in his head. And it's very clear to us that it isn't a soundtrack that we're listening to, but instead we're getting access to Salieri's mind and how he can create all of the music in his mind. And while this is happening, we have Mozart's wife Constanza in the back, sort of eating Viennese pastries, completely oblivious to this extraordinary music that is occurring for Salieri in his head. So such audiation is to sound what visualization is to images. It's a sort of creation of an inner space inaccessible to others. And it sounds like quite an audacious ability, really, but so too is the mind's ability to concoct the world of a novel, the way we often feel, oh, I don't like the movie version of that novel, right, because it's not the same as the one that's in my mind that I already have. So what I want to just do in the final section is look at some examples of novels where the music is sort of embedded within the sound world, and it's accessible only when we're reading the text. So this music doesn't exist in the outer world in any way. It never has existed, and it can only be activated when the reader is reading the text and perhaps audiating it in their own mind. So the three novels that I want to just mention, moments in each of them. The first is Kate O'Brien's 1958 novel As Music and Splendour. And this is a novel which follows the story of two young Irish girls in the 1880s, Rose and Claire, and they're sort of plucked from their small towns in Ireland and they're brought into the world of European opera. So they are trained in Paris, in Rome, to be great opera singers. And it's full of all of the well-known operas. The girls have to learn particular arias. But the piece in it that interests me most is an invented piece that Kate O'Brien has one of the characters, Thomas, create. He falls in love with Claire, who is in love with Louisa, so it's unrequited love. But he writes a selection of songs for her called Songs for Claire. And unlike all the other music, we can feel that Thomas, a young composer, is probably moving towards the sort of atonality of 20th century music. He's thinking to the future, and he composes the music based on acacia flowers, white flowers that are around them. And he says that the music is about those flowers in some way, but he uses poetry. He sets all of the music, the poetry to the music, and he sends it to Claire. And at the end of the book, Claire tries to perform the music herself. It's kind of coming of age moment. But as she learned the songs and learned stumblingly to find her way in their firm, clean structure, she heard by degrees what Thomas had heard and remade through his erratic pattern. And Claire commits to sing it as he hears it in his own head. And our challenge as readers is to imagine the sound of this music after we have been with so many well-known pieces of music in this book, all of which we could put the CD on and listen to. Here, O'Brien is challenging us to imagine what this music is that Thomas has composed, and to understand what it is for Claire, who has been trained so precisely to sing exactly what she's told, that she has to now start to interpret and find her own voice in this music that has not been heard before. So the second one then is This Is Not a Novel, a work by Jennifer Johnston, which also goes back to to World War I, and it concerns 4 different generations, and it's a book really about silences and echoes. There are beautiful echoes the whole way through the story. The main character, Imogen, actually loses her voice at one point and refuses or cannot speak, and she's completely silent. But we also go back often to her great-grandmother, who lost a son in World War I. And the great-grandmother, we only can access her through her diary, which she has left, and Imogen is reading it. And in it she tells of how she spends her time before she dies writing music for her lost son. And she uses the words of Francis Ledwidge's poetry.
and she sets that to music. But she does it all in her mind, and she doesn't want to write it down. She only wants him to hear this music. So she wants to play it when no one else is in the house on the piano, and that it somehow will go to him, will reach him. But this music, so it's very elusive in the text because Imogen can't hear it. She doesn't know what it actually sounds like. But this is what we get from the great-grandmother, Louisa. The work on the third Ledred song is going in fits and starts. My initial energy is drained somewhat, and I now find I have to work very hard at addressing the strange rhythms in the first lines of each verse. I write and see all on the staves in my mind. I play and am silent, perhaps 2 or 3 hours at a time. A ship on the sea. Those simple words I cannot fit to music. The song was for you and the ship was for me. I cannot fit to music. When I think of ships, all I can see are those vessels filled with young men heading through the Mediterranean to Turkey. I want to lament, with an element of the traditional in it, but only an element. There's a wandering thread of melody in my head, but I find it hard to capture. Maybe this time I will have to use pen and paper, but the thought of that frightens me. I want my music to die with me. And despite, or perhaps because of this immateriality of the music, it haunts the novel like a sort of fractured echo. And then the third one that I wanted to talk about is Grace Notes by Bernard McLafferty. And to my mind, this is one of the great novels on the attempt to capture music and composition and musicianship in a novel. The main character, Katherine McKenna, is a composer. And we're very close to her throughout. It's a novel that isn't just about music, but even the structure of the book reflects the structure of the music that she composes. It's a really, really beautiful novel, again, set during the Troubles in England. So we frequently accompany Katherine into her moments of inspiration and composition. We see her perform some of her music. She has produced a set of music based on Vermeer's paintings, and she plays that to her old piano teacher who sits and listens to it. She's composing a mass. She's using the structure of the mass. Although she has moved away from religion herself, she still wants to use that structure. But the most prolonged example of a performance of her composition is a piece called Vernicle that she composes, and is performed at length at the end of the book. It's an extraordinary piece of writing. Vernicle refers to the little badges that pilgrims would get when they go on their pilgrimage. It's a sign of where you've been and returned from. And the piece of music is in 2 parts, and it's her attempt to see if she can take the lambeg drums, which are traditionally used by the Orange Order, and whether she can remove any connotations of politics or sectarianism or violence from the sounds of the drums. Is that possible? She's wondering. So she sets up a piece where it's in 2 parts, 2 movements, and in both parts, at the end of each movement, the lambeg drums come in onto the stage and start thundering away over the orchestra. And in the first movement, it's dark and the thunderous sound is oppressive. But in the second, when they come back, it's the same sound, but somehow it is shifted, and it's joyous, and it seems to McLafferty suggests that what the drums are really haunted by is their ability to express joy and their ability to be pure sound. So Katherine is sitting in the audience while her piece is being performed, and she says this: what happens next is difficult to explain. It is in sound terms like counterpoint, the ability unique to music to say 2 or more things at once. But it is not like counterpoint, more like an optical illusion in sound. The same thing could be 2 things: transubstantiation. How could the drum battering of the first movement be the same as the drum battering of the second movement? How could the same drumming in a different context produce a totally opposite effect? The sound has transformed itself. Homophones, Lindsay Doyle, Bartok. Same sound but with a different meaning. The lambegs have been stripped of their bigotry and have become pure sound. So what does this give the author, this kind of space, this sort of imagined space? Jennifer Johnson doesn't need to produce these songs based on Ledred's poems, and Bernard McClafferty does not need to produce a piece of music in which the lamb-begged drums lose their sectarian connotations. This so is a chance to compose music without any restrictions. You can include moments of inexpressible trauma or pain. You can suggest that certain things were said in a song which could not be said in words. These are sites of possibility. Anything is possible. The author has none of the restrictions of the composer. You could have a piece of music that lasts 1,000 years. You could have a note sung beyond all human endurance. You could create extraordinary reactions in the audiences.